was having a talk with a friend of mine about Hondas. He likes Hondas. He thinks they're pretty cool vehicles. I've never owned a Honda, but my family's had Hondas. And friends have had Hondas, and they typically like them. But this guy worked at a Honda dealership for a while and told me something about Hondas I did not know. About 1 in 10 Hondas that have engines that come from Japan need a valve job right from the factory. This was years ago. I think they've since resolved the problem. What he was saying was it really did look. There's different ways of seating valves. Once you put an engine together, they have robots assemble everything and have human beings inspect them. And there's ways of fixing the valves not being seated perfectly. So they'll try and run the engine, and it'll tell them low compression in such and such a cylinder. And they'll go and they'll sit there and they get little forks that squeeze the valve spring, and you'll sit there and reseat the valve. You'll actually spin the valve and spray something on it, and it'll help the valve reseat itself. And you slowly bring the spring back online after it's got the lubricant on it, and it'll seat itself sometimes. Saves you from having to tear it apart and do a real valve job on it. Well, they were coming from the factory with bad valves, with the valves not seated properly, and the stems were bent just microscopically. You couldn't tell by looking at it, but you could put a micrometer on it and tell that the valve stem was bent on some of these cars. So they were trying to get a hold of Honda, and they were saying, look, some of these valve stems are bent from the factory, and what they're pretty sure is happening is another way of doing it is you put a block of wood on top of it and you bang it with a hammer, and it'll pop the spring and the valve, and everything will reseat. And sometimes that'll work to seat the valve, but guess what? About 1 in every 10 of them, you're bending the valve stem, because instead of doing this, it'll do this a little bit. And that has to have been what was going on from the factory. Somebody was sitting here reseating these valves, trying to get them out of the door. And because we are all unique snowflakes, 1 in 10 valve stems would be bent. And they sent letters, they sent bills to Japan trying to get them to wake up and stop doing this, and explaining to them what had to have been going on. And they got nowhere until somebody went to some show for Honda. It's a dealership show thing, kind of a convention, and bitched out some uppy muckety muck from Japan, and just reamed them at this place, basically in front of everybody, saying, look, this only happens to engines that come from Japan. This only happens to Honda engines that come from Japan. This only happens. It's probably one person is what he was speculating. One person was just cheating the system and not doing it right. And he said after somebody went into this show and complained, the next year it didn't happen. All of them were done. So somebody went back to Japan and said, look, this is happening. Wait, tell me what's going on. Explain to me what happens. They went through the whole process. Had to have gone through the whole process of testing these engines and looking at it and say, okay, this is where it's happening. Somebody is banging these with a block of wood instead of actually going through the trouble of reseating the valve. And I have told people many times that in my life, complaining has done me very well, because I have gotten, every job I've gotten has come from complaining intelligently. I complain about some problem intelligently, and I'm put in charge of that. So, the reward for complaining intelligently is proper work. You get to fix the problem. Yay me. This was years ago back, I think in the 90s, when my friend was complaining about this. Well, acquaintance was complaining about this. So hopefully they have since fixed that sort of problem, and people just banging on valve stems. There was a long run. I know everybody would say, oh, Hondas burn oil. Hondas burn oil. They do from the factory. They burn oil. And it's like, well, I don't know. The new ones don't seem to do it to me when I look at Hondas burning now. So I'm thinking there was probably some bad years of Hondas. I know that the CV joints in Hondas went out. And from what I'm told, that stopped in the early 2000s. You could buy a Honda, and they did something to fix the CV joints. Because every single Honda I ever knew, from the time I was a kid until at least the late 90s, you'd get about 50,000 miles out of it, and you'd start feeling that little grind out of the front end. And if you didn't immediately get it looked at, by 70,000 miles, your wheels were wobbling from the CV joints being so bad. And I really do think it's because of automatic transmissions. I think there was something about those automatics that they put in all those Hondas that wore out the wore out the CV joints faster, because when I talked to people who had stick shift Hondas, they would get 150,000 miles out of their CV joints. So I really do think it's just the fact that they were putting some different automatic transmission in the ones that were coming to America, or that, or nobody bought automatics in Japan or something, or wherever the hell they sell Hondas. Maybe nobody buys automatics anywhere else. I mean, our car's an automatic. We've had pretty good luck with it so far. It's got just over 100,000 miles on it, on our Corolla here, and she's running like a top so far. Where's some wood? Here we go. So hopefully she keeps going. It's a Corolla, man. Built, I mean, they are built stout, and their engine sounds and feels like a tractor engine. From what I'm told, it ain't far off from a tractor engine, but I don't care. Runs. Let me know your car thoughts. Yeah, I can talk cars. I can't really do anything with cars. So drop a comment. Let me know your car stories.